the same accounts for all departments, whether or not they're used. We have 3 years of data, and we improved our narratives. We also, one major item is our assumption on sales tax growth. We're assuming 3%. This, in 2015, we were assuming 5%, so we're actually getting a little bit more conservative and just projecting 3%, even though we're experiencing higher rates. So that we're doing that just for the purposes of being conservative. We also have another major assumption where we're building reserves. We're showing 650,000 transfer in 15, and I think another 600,000 in 16. So that is, again, another important thing, I think, in order to remain conservative and help become more financially stable as an agency.
It fulfills a directive from the board to build a 2-month reserve, a 2-month operating reserve, and it accomplishes it sooner than specified.
We have other assumptions that are built into this with capital. We have 13 buses, 12 van-pool vans, shifting radio repeaters from 15 into the 16 because we haven't fulfilled that yet. Parker Road revision, possible Parker Road bike station, 2 heavy engine rebuilds, mobile data, software and hardware, and principal and interest paying down our bond. Those are all that are built into this budget. We have also a couple contracts for Tri-County Connector, paratransit, and rural mobility built in. There was a 25% increase in contracted revenue for contracts we have in hand, so that we know that we can get that money. There's no fare revenue built in, no 412 service built in. We did build in a contingency for any kind of wage decisions that might be ongoing. We have a 6% medical insurance premium increase figured in, and also our PERS increase at 21.5%.
Those medical and PERS are beyond our control. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, those are coming from outside.
Those are things that have been set upon us.
Yeah.
We also have some other large expenses built in, $70,000 for a central disk storage system, firewall data switches. We have $85,000 budgeted for contracted legal, executive search, organizational review. $24,000 is budgeted to refurbish Harbor Station, which is more than just painting. It's also fixing some of the wood structure, internal structure.
Some electrical.
Perhaps some electrical, whatever needs to be done there, and that was specified by our management team. And we have $35,000 increased staff training built into this budget. We looked at various positions. We determined that we needed an increase in 1.5% for positions. We looked at some others and didn't increase it, like the receptionist position, and we added some smaller items like, I think, executive director moving expenses that might be coming up in 2016. There were also some other minor revisions for tax revenues that we're experiencing that would affect a projection going forward. So there were some minor items and adjustments that we made throughout that process to come to a surplus that exists in the 2016 budget of about $65,000. So that's where we've been, and right now, before us we have version 6.0. Like I said, it's showing a surplus of about $65,000, and if you want, we can walk through any pages and answer any questions you may have.
I have a couple of questions here for you, Paul. Can you give me the dollar value of the 2-month operating reserve that you're targeting and the time in which we're going to achieve that amount?
Well, I think that we were trying to shoot for 2 months of operating expenses.
What's that value?
I think that we were hoping to be up around that 1.6 million. And in the 2 years, 15 and 16, I think we were going to be at 1.25 million. So we're approaching, we were trying to hit our target in 5 years. Originally, the board said we wanted to reach it in 10 years, but we shaved that down to 5 years. And we'll be probably gathering the bulk of that in the first 2 years.
Okay.
We'll be 2/3 of the way there in the first 2 years. So it's pretty clear that we can make it in 5 years.
Okay, and then the other condition on the use of those funds cannot be used without the majority approval of the board, is that
Yeah, we're
correct?
setting it aside in a separate fund that you would see on the cash statement. And we wouldn't touch that unless the board gave us direction to touch it.
And do we have a resolution in place for that?
Don't believe we do yet. There's a draft one.
But we should have one in place.
It's written into the budget narrative, I think.
Well, yeah, in our budget book, we define various procedures and goals that we're setting as part of the finance committee, you might say, objectives or mandates. And that will be one, of course, the budget book hasn't been completed yet, but that will be something that's going to be stated there
Right.
as an objective of the finance committee.
Yeah, and so that it's clear and easy to recognize and identify and interpret, can we have a resolution at the next formal meeting that formalizes the use of those funds? Does that take a motion from the board to?
No, the motion will be when it's actually before you.
When it comes back, we'll see whether
Okay.
you like it.
Good. Any questions by any of the board members?
You addressed part of mine, but I don't think you can completely answer the question. My question was going to be, so as of January 1st, 2016, or as of the adoption of this budget, $650,000 is going to be put in an operating reserve that cannot be touched without board vote.
Well, here's the way we manage our money. And so we have one account with the Adams County Treasurer, and what we would do is we would designate, just like I've done for all of the other reserves, whether it be buses or surplus vehicles or vans or whatever, is that we would, of our total cash that we have on hand that we would reconcile every month, we would show that separately from the general cash.
Yes, and to use it would require a vote of the board.
Yeah,
Okay, so
We
here's
would
my
follow the
second question.
resolution.
Okay, so this is the only problem I got. We have reserve balances, the first deal you have. You got bus, vans, sport
Page
vehicles,
on there.
other capital or operating. Page 2.1.
Okay.
And then in those reserve balances, you have general operating cash last line. That is the money that we're operating with. That's our checkbook. That's money to operate with month to month. That should be down here in operating revenues, not in reserve balances, because it leads one to believe that you can use reserve money. Reserve is put aside for use only with board approval.
So you're
If it's
saying
in
show that separately.
operating money, it should be in operating revenues. That's our checkbook.
Well, here's the way I'll follow up on that.
I think the board discussed this, and the original request was to show it as a reserve line item. We thought that was more protective than having it come and go in the operating side. But I didn't mean to answer for you, Paul.
Well, the verbiage is confusing because it makes it, you've got general operating cash. That means it's your checkbook. This is your money that you're using to pay the day-to-day bills.
Correct.
What I wanted in a reserve balance, which we have now, is showing operating reserve of $650,000. Reserve means that it's put aside and untouchable. That's the savings account.
It's a restricted account.
Right.
Yes.
And that's the line above,
Right, so if you're looking.
page 2.2, right at the bottom.
Well, after 2016, if you look at column 4, you're showing operating, which is a reserve, and then there's general operating, which is what we use for day-to-day. And so you're seeing $1.25 million at the end of 2016 in that operating line, operating reserve, you might say.
Okay, right. You have operating reserve, which is a restricted fund.
Yeah,
General operating cash is the money that you can use day-to-day to pay bills and wages.
That's right.
So it should not be in reserve balance. It should be in general revenues that you can expend.
I get your point, and it seems to me that maybe a more ideal way would be pull it out of that collection of reserves and keep it separate.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. Have it
Yeah.
separate, because it leads you to believe that this money can't be touched.
Yeah.
That money is what we pay our bills with.
I think this presentation, the way I put it together, was just an effort to really simplify, get a starting, activity, and ending, and I just kept them all together there,
Yeah.
just for simplification. But certainly, I can pull that out and just put it on a separate line.
And
I
identify it
would
as a
agree.
restricted
Yeah.
fund.
No, well, no, the
Or of the
operating,
restricted fund.
Yeah, just
yeah,
not
you've got, one
assigned
fund is
for any
restricted,
purpose.
the other fund is operating.
Right.
Yeah.
They need to be separated, so that there's no confusion down the road saying, oh, we can cut a check here.
Sure, sure. I understand your point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And you know,
And-
I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the other question I had, when you mentioned, and I know we mentioned this at a workshop or something before, and I was wondering if there's any follow-up on it. When you're talking the increase in the medical revenues, did you have to make sure to see, has anybody checked to see if your provider has like the wellness program where your employees are involved in a fitness program of some type, et cetera, that they can, because we save a ton of money at the county with that.
Yeah, I haven't checked on that, I'll do it today.
Well, we're talking about a 4% difference in the increase. Instead of 7%, it was 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, I'll look into it today.
Yeah.
I think that, we signed a contract with certain terms right now, but
Yeah.
if we can lower that premium, we'll try to do it.
Because the insurance providers are doing that. I think we've got the same providers. Anyway, that's all I had. That's all I had about it.
Lance, do you have any, Jim?
Well, I had the advantage of working with Paul on this, so I asked questions before.
Are these questions that you have right now, would they come up when we go on to business item number 1, or do you want to ask them?
No, I said my questions have been answered.
Okay, all right, thank you. No further questions. We'll open this up to public comment and questions.
Yeah.
That would be Chuck Craig.
Yeah, Chuck Craig, North Whitby. I didn't go through it in all the detail, but I'm curious about, you show in there a labor increase about 4.7%, 5%, and you say you've built in a contingency, but is that contingency in that 5%? Or
It is.
It is?
It is.
Okay, and then along the lines with the labor contingency thing, I know that all the labor negotiations, you can't talk about them and stuff like that, but do you have an idea when you will even know what that figure is? Is there a timeline for completing that?
On the
Negotiation.
labor negotiations?
Yeah, so, you say you got a contingency built in there. When will we know whether the contingency was adequate or not?
I'm going to have Matt address this. This is a legal issue.
Yeah, I know.
It's a fluid issue.
Right, okay.
Really, when the process is complete, is probably is,
But there is no timeline for that? That's what I was asking.
they're fluid
Okay.
processes.
Okay, all right, the last question was, you show the 23.3% PURES increase, and you say it comes from outside the organization. Where does it come from? I don't.
It comes
And
from the state.
why is it so large?
I would imagine that the increase is related to the way the stock market's performing. They watch averages over various years and they readjust their rates. And if the stock market's underperforming, they raise the amount that we have to pay into it to make up the difference, because they need to meet people's pensions.
Right.
So
is it every year that it's adjusted up and down?
I don't know if it's every year. I think it might even be whenever they feel that it's appropriate or necessary. I don't know if they're strictly on a timeline to do it. I'm sure they're doing a recalculation every year, but whether they impose it on the.
I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like a number that's completely out of whack with every other number on your budget. And I understand that it's not anything you can do, but as a taxpayer, I'd like to understand a little bit more about the process and where do we go to find out why it's so drastic.
Well, they do have a lot of their information online. You can just go on and like Google PERS and read their reports and see how, you know, how their rates are determined or changed, or maybe even call and ask them.
It's a Department of Revenue, Department of Retirement Services, DRS.
Okay, all right.
State.
That's it.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other people sitting out there in those chairs next to you there, Chuck, who have a question?
Any questions?
Okay, Gail, I'm sure you have a question.
Well, I just, well, you know, I've been out of the loop for a little bit, but I haven't had a chance to really go over the draft too much. I just wanted to ensure that, I know with the audit starting last month, that assuredly we're going to have some repeat findings. And I just want to make sure that the board is going to be a little bit more involved, and so that we don't have as many boards inadequate oversight or lack of oversight, and management is going to happen again next year. We know it's already going to hit us this year, but hopefully, especially when it comes to the budget and to pay and benefits and all that other stuff, hopefully we're going to monitor it and certify it a little bit better.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Ken. Do we have any findings in the audit? I don't recall a finding in our
2000, the current.
in the current audit or the last audit report. The current audit
It's not
report.
complete
The
yet.
last report for 2013, we had a couple findings.
That's 2 years.
2013.
Right now, we're in the middle of an audit for 2014.
Okay, thank you.
And those
The
results,
current audit is still ongoing.
yeah, those results are anticipated, at least draft, later this month.
They said that they wanted to finalize it in December.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's a link, anybody that's interested, there's a link, they can go online and they can see exactly where we're at on it. It's all open.
I think we're online.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move along. That is, now we'll go on to the consent agenda.
Close the hearing.
Oh, excuse me. Take that, we'll stick with it. So I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. I can just close it, I don't need a motion. Okay, let the record show that the public hearing is now closed.
Rick, can I say something?
Yes, please.
We added the master voucher list to the consent agenda, but it's not on the agenda. We weren't sure, because of the early meeting, we
Yeah.
weren't sure we could get that to you in time for this meeting, and we have distributed that to you, and
Right.
Jim's triaged it, but it's not listed on the
So
agenda.
then we would need a motion to add that to the consent agenda coming up. Yeah. Thanks, Meg. Ready to move along now to the consent agenda. So at this particular time, then, with that information, we will consider a approval of the consent agenda or a modification to it, and then approval of it. So I will entertain a motion.
Yes, well,
To
I
modify it?
have had a chance to look over the voucher list a couple of days ago. I would like to add the master voucher list to the consent agenda for discussion and approval.
One second.
If it's going to be discussed, let's go to a regular session.
Oh, well, for approval as part of the consent agenda.
Part of the consent agenda.
Right, right.
So no discussion. I'll second it. Will you second it?
Well, we have a
I'll
second.
shorten it, I just want to add the master voucher.
Moving to add there.
Okay, there has been a motion by Mr. Sanders to add the master voucher list to the consent agenda, and a second by Ms. Henderson.
Thank you.
There we go. Any further comments? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously that we have the master voucher list for December 2015 added to the consent agenda. Now we'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as modified.
I second it.
Okay, Ms. Henderson made a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified, second by Mr. Sundberg. And any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous, so we have a consent agenda. We're going to move on to our monthly reports, interim executive director's report. Ken, do you have anything to report to the board?
Just two quick items. Mr. Chairman, during two separate meetings that I've attended recently. One is I was invited as a participant on a committee regarding the study of redevelopment of the Clinton area. There's a study underway by a consultant that was issued by South Whitby Port Commission. And from a public transit standpoint or transportation standpoint, Island Transit was invited to participate in that process along with other county and state organizations in looking at alternatives for redeveloping the Clinton area, the South County area there around the ferries, and I guess up to possibly Langley as well. So that's interesting. That'll be an ongoing project. I don't know the exact date of conclusion on it, but it looks exciting. It's fairly expensive consulting project. And I think it's very ambitious, but Island Transit's included in that, and I think that's, I think we can benefit from that in terms of getting some improvements down by the ferry area. And the second meeting was, that I attended and briefly spoke at was the farmhouse gate meeting at Everett Station last Friday. It was the larger annual or semi-annual meeting where various elected officials from around the county and the region, as well as transportation staff folks, as well as general public interested in transportation issues. Public transit was was a dominant item on the agenda for Friday's meeting, and we addressed the issue of regional connectivity and the funding for regional connectivity. Representative Hayes was there and spoke and is supportive of trying to establish a mechanism to allow for ongoing permanent financing of regional connectivity, not just in the Northwest, but statewide, and is supportive of trying to make it a more of a routine funding issue rather than the biennial patchwork process that we're going through currently. So I think there's going to be good support for that. It was a good meeting. Approximately 60, 70 people showed up. Helen was there representing the commission, and it was a good meeting, very eye-opening, and so I encourage you when you get an invitation to attend a farmhouse game meeting. It's become a very influential group, and it's getting notice from our elected officials in Olympia. So,
How wide a scope, how many counties are?
It's call it the Northwest group. It's San Juan Island, Whatcom, Skagit Island, and Snohomish. And it covers passenger and freight rail, public transit, and highway issues are discussed. But since that has, since there are so many other groups involved in the highway planning process, that is discussed, but it seems to not receive quite the focus that public transit and rail gets from this group, just because rail and transit needs a stronger voice, or a strong voice, and so there's a lot of attention given to rail and transit, but highways also are included.
Did we talk about the ferry terminal?
Oh, and ferries, yeah, ferries.
I mean, the ferry terminal project in
Mukilteo, yeah. Yeah, that was covered. In fact, an update was given on that.
Yeah.
Can you give us, or did they give you a window on when they're gonna have that I'm gonna call it an interlocal transportation system connected? We have a 5-year, 3-year, 6-year, 10-year connection where you can take the train, the ferry, the bus system where it meets up at that terminal system. Where are they in that whole scope of that whole package?
That is included kind of in a general sense in the state transit plan. There aren't really timetables given to it, but it's an ongoing effort, and continuously there's discussion and projects put forward to building that linked system, but I'm not aware of any particular timetables. It's kind of a work in progress at this point, but no, I haven't seen any timetables.
So it wasn't, that item was not discussed at that farmhouse meeting?
Well, it was generally covered by the state folks that were there in terms of what they call sketch plans for various corridors, and those sketch plans include rail, transit, rail buses, highways, and they're looking at it on a corridor by corridor basis. But again, I don't see specific timeframes for it.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. The chair's report. Chair's report is our meeting. It's ongoing. That's my report. Financial analyst report.
I just wanted to keep this brief. I'm not going to do a slideshow, but currently we're about almost 2.2 million in cash. So we're in a good position to pay off our WISTIT, which will happen in January at about $30 million.
Insurance.
Yeah, it's our insurance. That we're back on track paying insurance in January now of 2016. And so we will probably see a little bit more state revenue because some of those reimbursements have been delayed like a month, it seems. So I'm foreseeing us hitting our targets that we set forth in our 2015 budget. We could end the year, depending of course on how the state reimburses us, somewhere between $2.2 and $2.4 million.
I'm going to ask you a question, Paul. Last January, this board put into motion a stabilization plan for the recovery of this thing. And we had several timetables in there, and one of the main ones was to have a stable cash flow and pay down the insurance and the debt that we had. This may be an unfair question to ask, because I'm kind of surprising you with this. Are we on schedule on meeting those deadlines? Are we ahead of schedule? We didn't establish specific dates, but when I look at particularly when I'm looking at the budget, it looks like within 12 months, we're substantially in a pretty good recovery position.
Well, I think that we're, compared to where we were last year, I would say that we're maybe a little bit ahead of schedule because of our fuel prices. We've had capital expenditures that were planned in 2015 that have been delayed to 16. So at the end of the year, it might make us look a little more flush than we would have planned. But that money's being held over for next year's expenditures if we can meet those like bus purchases and radio purchases, some other items that are on our capital schedule for budgeted. And they were last year, we just didn't use them. So we were holding a little more cash that we plan to spend in 16. But I would say overall, we're slightly ahead of what we were expecting, mostly because of our fuel.
Okay.
And the other item I'll say is, and I said this at our finance committee meeting this morning, is that we received a renewal of Tri-County Connector, which was favorable for us. Of course, it's only 2 years, it's a biennial renewal, and I think that's helped us a little bit as well.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I recall the goals expressed early in the year, and we've kept those in mind in the finance subcommittee, and I think we've met, and as Paul said, we're ahead of those goals. But the carryover that he's talking about requires matches, and those matches will be readily available from our cash flow, because the matches that are required for those capital expenditures are in the neighborhood of 300,000, something like that. So we are on goals and monitoring them, and have met the goals for this year and exceeded them a bit.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add to that too, that the deferrals that Paul mentioned in capital expenditures, for the most part, really haven't been intentional on our part, because they were, in a sense, in the beginning of the year, but during the course of the year, there have been certain government circumstances in Olympia that have precluded us from being able to access those funds, the state funds for those purchases, during the 2015 timeline like we projected. There's been a delay in providing new specifications for the vehicles, for the buses that we order off the state contract. There's been a delay in developing those new specifications, so that's delayed the process on buses. And the radio and repeater system, that's been delayed and held up by state paperwork as well. So originally those were intended to be put off, but as it turns out, the state's put them on for us.
Okay. So the bottom line is, on the stabilization plan, we are making progress.
Yeah, I think we're on target, and we're trailing basically down the road that we planned.
And I think it's incumbent upon the staff and the board to still keep our eye on that ball too. Okay. Anything else? Is that the end of your report?
That's the end of my report.
Okay. So we'll move on to the regular agenda then. Item number 1 is a resolution 1014 establishing the 2016 annual budget for Island County Public Transportation Benefit Area, DBA Island Transit. And I guess, Paul, you could open that one up too, or Ken.
We already
We
already did
about
this.
it.
We already did the public
Yeah.
hearing.
Okay, we're just going through the motion.
Yeah.
To approve the budget.
Okay.
I would move to.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to move to approve resolution number 1014, establishing the 2016 annual budget for the Island County Public Transportation Benefit Area, doing business as Island Transit.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Sundberg to approve resolution 1014, establishing the 2016 annual budget for Island County Public Transportation Benefit Area, seconded by Ms. Henderson. Any further discussion on this?
Yes, I just want to make sure that the general operating cash, the line for the general operating cash to move out of beginning reserve balance.
Yeah, I'm going to set that off into a separate area just below that, so it would show as 2 separate items.
And unfortunately, there's room on the page.
Yeah, and there will be a resolution coming forward
For discussion.
Okay.
I would also draw attention to the fact that our official resolution adopts page 1.1, and that is that is the overall framework. I mean, it adopts the whole budget, but page 1.1 is the, I would say, the controlling framework for the budget. And so that will,
1.1 has, this is not correct. Transfer to operating reserves is 600,000, that should be 650,000.
650 is happening in 2015, 600,000.
Oh, okay, that's the 16, but add 2. All right, never mind.
it's added to, yeah.
Well, this is part of the discussion that I thought we would have before we got into the motion part of it.
Well, this is good.
That's okay,
Yeah, this is good.
So we're restricted, we're still restricting this in definition to the resolution.
Yeah.
And we're just, on the budget, we're not using the word restricted, we're using it signed.
Signed,
Okay.
signed is good.
All right. Then make a note of that.
So I would just add that this is the most thorough budget review that I've experienced in the 4 years that I've been on the board. I think it's been a good discussion. We've squeezed and saved in line item by line item. Commissioner Jill Johnson was very vigilant in that regard, and Commissioner Rick Hannold has been vigilant here also on many items, as has every member of the board. So that I think I have a lot of confidence in the accuracy of this as a budget framework for the coming year. And as Paul has reminded us many times, a budget is a planning document, and we can't totally foresee the future, but we've been very conservative, so that hopefully next year the budget goals will be met, and we'll continue to show this upward trend in full recovery.
Any other comments before I call for the question?
Just that I think this is a good document. I know a lot of work went into it. We are certainly in better shape today than we were a year ago when we went through this, when I first came on the board. And I want to thank everybody for their hard work. Fuel prices have been a good positive for us. We can't continue to hope for that, though I guess we could, but I like the fact that we have budgeted for the worst, and we hope for the best. And the Tri-County Connector was a bonus. So hopefully by the next biennial budget that they will have worked out something where it's going to be more of a routine expenditure from the state. I think they've realized that this is a concern, and hopefully it'll be easier, but again, we can't count on it. So we need to not get complacent that good times are here. They're better, but we're not in good times.
Yeah, I would
work on it.
Good comment, Rick. And also, to elaborate a little bit more on that too, for the public's information, we are looking forward to successful negotiations with the represented employees and a successful analysis of the non-represented positions too, because those are all integral parts of this budget to make this budget work. So I'll call for the question. All of those in favor of Resolution 1014 establishing 2016 annual budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries unanimously. Now the board is going to go into a closed session regarding collective bargaining, RCW 42.3.140, paragraph 4B. And we will not make any decisions in this closed session. If we make a decision, we will come back out and make our decision in the public. And I'm kind of thinking we'll be in for a half hour approximately. Does that seem right to you, Ken?
Sure, to start with.
To start with, yeah, and we will notify the public if we extend that.
Are we staying here? Or
We're going to go back in the train.
Meg, we're going to set up the phone.
I told her,
Oh.
it's like 4:11, but
No, I'm not sure that. That's not an issue.
Yeah, it's the main reason we look at this. Say, okay, it costs us more than so that's yeah, I know that it's been figured out before, but I figured it'd be easier to ask you. Oh, cool. I am. Oh, you got it, there you go. And that's what we shoot for. Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Hi, Jesse, how are you? So what's going to happen with the lodging tax thing Wednesday?
I don't know.
Should it still be sent back?
Yeah.
There's time?
Yep, we can send it back, or we can just say, okay, well, we're not accepting that. I don't understand why Oak Harbor Chamber of Commerce should get a 50% increase in what they receive when everybody else is operating on 2 to 3%. Everybody else across the board gets 2 to 3%. Why should, if we're gonna give them 50%, I want them to quantify what results they got with their money last year. And it better be more than what we handed out, 50,000
Well, that's the
flyers.
amount that's being held.
That don't cut it.
That's the starting point, so it's kind of
They're
like,
being re-
here's the starting bank balance,
Well, that's what I was.
activity, and
Unincorporated
then you
taxes.
see down here,
So there
another
should be
600 that's gonna go into.
Okay,
That's
so
my
are-
view.
But are all
How it
these
goes with the other side, I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see.
2016.
So be there.
So
Yeah, and we're gonna be doing
Okay,
that,
all
I
right.
think,
the same is down here ending.
right after lunch.
So
'Cause I've
you'll
got to
see
take a
that
2-hour
if you
break,
look
because I
at
have a
the
bunch of.
ending with
Oh,
the-
I got you, I got
same
you.
beginning of the next page.
Okay, I see it, yep.
Right after lunch.
Yeah, I think it's right after lunch we're gonna do it. Double check the agenda, it's on there.
Excuse me. Do you have a list of the salaries for non-represented people?
Chuck, good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Rick.
You hanging out?
I'm gonna, yeah, I had plans to be here, so.
Let me talk to him and see.